There might not be a lot of banter on this one. That's okay.
Okay.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man podcast. My name is Chris Niemeyer. I'm here with my good friends, Jamie Slingerland, Michael McGreevy, and Christopher McCluskey. We are just four guys who are crazy about our wives. We love our kids, and we want to kill it in business. This podcast is talking about those important domains. And if you've been listening for any amount of time, you know that we are not afraid to go ahead and address topics that really matter. They matter in life. You know, we have addressed issues and circumstances that we're going through as guys. And we know there's value in having a discussion because it's on the mind of our friends as well. And this is kind of a heavier episode, if I'm going to be honest here, in terms of just coming off a heavy weekend and talking to our kids, talking to ourselves even really about tragedy. How do you handle that? You know, Sunday morning, guys, we woke up to the news of 2 horrible shootings in this country. And as we're processing that, we then get a notification that one of our dear friends lost her daughter, her adult daughter, overnight, just vanished in her sleep. And just processing the weight, the gravity of those tragedies all combined is something that we're still working through, right? We're still talking about. And yet I think there's such a benefit to exploring this topic. As a man of the household, we have this mantle of responsibility to discuss this deep, weighty subject of tragedy in our lives and leading our spouse, leading our children well in this. If you even have cable TV, I would admonish you, this is probably a decent time to turn it off and to take the responsibility, become the man of valor in your household to lead this conversation well, because we believe that every EFM man should talk about tragedy because of the benefits that we'll share. Chris, can you help us just unpack this topic? It's again, a weighty one, but there are benefits to dissecting and talking about tragedy in our own family. How do you go about that in your household?
Yeah, it's a massive, massive topic and massively important that we handle it proactively, just like everything else in our parenting role. When we experience something horrible, something horrific, a loss of our own, a loss with someone else that we care about, or these horrible things that have happened on a national or international level, God built us in such a way that our internal reaction is to turn away, to run, to not want to actively walk toward that kind of pain and suffering and trauma and all. It's a self-preserving defensive response, and it's good. That part of us that burns our hand once on the stove and decides, I'm not going to put my hand on the stove anymore. That's a good self-protective kind of a turning away from something that's painful. But emotional pain is quite different from physical pain and just kind of putting ourselves back out there day in, day out with a bully or something. When it's something emotional that has happened and we don't want to have to accept it, but it is in fact reality and it needs to be accepted and wrestled through, then we have to choose to walk towards something that we're warring with inside of ourselves. Because a big part of ourselves is, don't go there. Don't talk about that. Don't bring it up again. My gosh, whatever you do, if you're going to, put on a stony face. Don't let the tears start to flow. And goodness, let's not talk about it as a family with the kids. They don't need to hear about this kind of thing. There's an internal battle that we have to wrestle as a man in choosing how to, in a healthy fashion, move toward tragedy. So I think that's a starting place, Chris, is just to recognize that inside of ourselves, we are not automatically going to move in healthy directions in the face of tragedy.
And you don't want this one to sneak up on you either. Maybe you haven't had a major loss in your family yet. Maybe you have. Maybe you're in the middle of one right now. But if you haven't already experienced a major tragedy, it's coming. somebody close to you is going to die, somebody who you really love is going to get sick, or something terrible is going to happen. And this is not to scare you or to freak you out or to get you to worry about that all day long, because that's not healthy either. But it's something to be prepared for, because as a family, you're going to have to walk through this, and you're going to have these discussions with your kids. And we think this is an important one.
Yeah, those are good points, guys. And I'm even reflecting here as we talk about the Enneagram a lot, and I'm looking at my 3 friends here that are all 7s. Typically, you don't want to talk about pain. You'd rather avoid it. I'm married to a 7, so I know this very well. And yet you're absolutely right. Knowing the tendency, but then knowing the responsibility and the weightiness and the importance of addressing this, especially as a family, especially when we see things on the news and the newspapers, and maybe our kids are in situations where they're going to hear about this in one way or another. So taking the responsibility internally as a family, knowing that there are benefits that come with this. I want to get into benefit number 1, because as you talk about tragedy openly as a family, it opens up the lines of communication. In a healthy way, we're getting to, again, take the mantle of responsibility to start that conversation in our home and direct kind of how that conversation goes, ask healthy questions. But Jamie, how would you approach this with, you have kids from a good span of ages here. So when you talk about even just these most immediate tragedies that we're experiencing in our lives right now, what does that look like with this first benefit of healthy and open communication?
As McCluskey was talking, I remember that the old song by the Bird from Ecclesiastes, turn, turn, turn. You remember that? It's in there that there is a time for birth and a time for death. There's a time to mourn. There's a time to celebrate. I don't want to raise little robots that are just conditioned and respond to conditions. I want them to have the opportunity to feel and love and think and grieve, even though I know they're going to have their hearts broken and that life is difficult sometimes. And then for our kids to see us as parents, mom and dad, being transparent about how we feel about it, we can be examples to them.
Some of these deep conversations about faith, about empathy, about how to be kind to others when they're going through a tragedy, how to talk about what you're feeling when you're going through a tragedy, all those things, when they can be connected to a specific example, can really set the stage for some powerful conversations with your kids.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michael. I'm just even thinking back to 5-6 weeks ago, Alicia's grandfather passed away, and kids were very close to him, have great memories, great fond pictures and all this stuff. And I remember waking them up, or actually as they woke up that next morning when we found out, just, they knew something was up because the morning routine was a little off and my mommy was still in bed. And dad brought him in and said, we just need to talk about something. And, knew mommy was crying and something was wrong. And we just had to just discuss, we lost someone really special to us. And for them to see that, and like, as you just said, then they start to ask questions. They start to, well, where's he going to go? And you get to explore even their faith, at a very young age, getting to understand a little bit about heaven. And not that I'm any theologian, but we're just trying to process some of that with them and talk through it. And even at those young ages, it's so valuable to open those communication lines to say that, hey, it's worth feeling this way. We're supposed to, Jamie, back to your point earlier, Ecclesiastes, it's okay to mourn in these situations. It's okay to rejoice too. We know where he is. But I love what you just shared there about kids need to kind of wrestle with this a bit, right?
Oh, very definitely. I love what you said, Chris, that you brought the kids in, and your wife was crying, and they saw that, and we heard you choking up as you're talking about it even now. I mean, this is pretty fresh loss in your family here. And if our first benefit here of facing tragedy well is that we're encouraging open communication, I think we got to start with the fact that tears are a communication. And tears in the face of tragedy communicate better than most words. In fact, usually the things that people blow when they go to try to comfort somebody is when they start talking. You can look at the book of Job, and throughout it, the best thing his friends did when he was facing such horrible tragedy was they sat with him in silence for 7 days, in sackcloth and ashes, mourning with him, because they knew wisely at that point, there are no words. But I'm not going to have him sit there in this alone. I'm going to be with him. And as Jesus says then in the New Testament, weep with those who weep. Don't counsel them. Don't advise them. Don't give them some bumper sticker theology. Well, I guess heaven needed another angel. First, that's bad theology. We don't want to turn into angels when we go to heaven. And secondly, just shut up, please. That's well-intended, but really misses the mark. Allowing tears to communicate to each other and even to ourselves. Often first and most importantly to ourselves. That when you try to find the words and there are no words, you can't wrap your brain around a reality. Thank you, Lord, that you gave us the ability to cry. Do we as men affirm that? We're not even just saying it's okay to. It's important to. It's important to communicate with our kids in tears that tragedy, death, these are things that brought Jesus to tears. Jesus didn't sniffle. Jesus didn't kind of, grimace. Jesus wept. That kind of affirmation of walking toward the pain, embracing the pain of the pain, and communicating it through a means better generally than our talking. Hugely, hugely valuable. What you gave your kids there, you and Alicia, that's why they begin to ask questions. Because they realize, what I'm feeling like doing, mommy's already doing, daddy's doing it now. That must be normal. And then we can process with words over time.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue to understanding that more is caught than taught. The fact that your kids could see Alicia grieving openly through that almost gives them permission. Like, it's okay. If I feel really sad about something, I'm going to let those tears come and I'm going to feel it. And they experience it that way because they watched you experience grief in an honest way. And that's powerful when our actions translate to a permission for our own kids. From there, the foundation is set for them to then explore, well, what is my spiritual foundation going to be? What do I look to when I'm in the middle of an awful tragedy? Like when I'm at the end of myself and the tears are flowing, what is my rock that I'm going to cling to? And they're then having to search for that on their own in a way and with our guidance. So that's huge that your kids were able to see that, Chris.
Well, and I'm sure we've all gone through those kind of losses, and even just thinking through this weekend's tragedies and how to explore that with my own kids. And we actually haven't really talked about it, frankly, yet. They heard us pray for our friend, yesterday and the loss that they had there. But yeah, this idea, this benefit of a lot more is caught than taught. Chris, to your point, it's you just be there. You don't want to teach. There's no dialogue that needs to happen at some points. It's just to be with them in this tragedy and the emotions that come of it. To know that, like you said, Michael, there's going to be questions when they see how mom and dad are processing it. There's going to be those questions that come up, and you're giving them permission to feel, to explore those feelings, to ask the questions when they relate to those. But boy, this is not easy, right, guys? I mean, this is not easy to deal with the processing of tragedy on our own, and then yet lead our kids in it too. It's like we kind of have to be, or we feel like we have to be a step or half a step ahead of them. But when it's raw, it's raw.
It really is. I think part of what we're battling is not only our own tendencies that I was talking about at the beginning, just that we're at war with ourselves. We don't want to walk towards something that's painful, even though we know we need to. But our culture, our Western culture, generally, I would say, doesn't grieve well. We kind of stink at it. When you look at Jewish culture in Scripture, and if you stop and think about passages that we've all read and are familiar with, When someone passed away, we read about there being mourners there, and we read about things that, for the most part, we don't practice. We've never known anybody who did practice rending of their clothing, tearing your garment, crying out with a loud voice, sitting on the ground and throwing up dust and ashes, taking off your nice torn garment now and putting on sackcloth, plucking out your beard, shaving your head, fasting. I've never seen that at any Western gathering. And I'm not suggesting that we go to all of that, but I'm saying, wow, we've moved way far away from very specific chosen actions that a culture for hundreds and hundreds of years affirmed as being a valuable way to grieve. And there are some cultures today that do much more of that active walking towards something you don't want to walk toward than what we do. We put on the game face and we do the shh, it's going to be okay. It's all right. Life will go on. He's in a better place. And then we get together for our wakes. There's no wailing and weeping. There's like a soft organ quietly playing in the back of the room, and anybody that starts to come unglued, like they're ushered out of the room, shh, it's okay. Blah. Yeah. We got to do better than that in affirming when you need to grieve, you need to grieve. That's what it means to weep with those who weep. Don't counsel them.
I've seen in Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico what you're talking about, where there's people screaming, and that second benefit of having more caught than taught, that is just so healthy. Having our kids see us, this hurts, and I'm grieving, and there is that immature faith, right? Where we're never allowed to question anything or just pretend like God is good all the time. Like, we know God is a good God, but I think it's just so honest for us to question in front of our kids, to be like, I don't know why this happened, and it feels unfair, and for us to mourn. And I do think that there's, and especially in our American culture, there's this tendency for us just to keep it all bottled up all the time. I know we have a psychotherapist on the line, so I should ask him, what happens when people keep it bottled up all the time?
Two things happen, and it's a great question, but one thing is that it blunts all other emotion. The energy that needs to be released through proper expression of every emotion that we have as human beings, in your anger, don't sin. But that doesn't say don't have anger. It says in your anger, have the anger, express the anger. So grief, tragedy, loss, excitement, all range of human emotions have energy to them, and our psyche, our soul, needs to be able to expend it, to release it. And when it does in healthy, non-sinful manner, we are more fully alive. When we do the opposite and try to cap it, we blunt everything. It's not like you can pick and choose which emotions you're not going to feel. You blunt them all because you're stopping up your feeler, if you will. The other thing that happens is that energy, like in physics, right? No energy is ever created nor destroyed. It merely changes properties. Well, what properties does psychological, emotional pain take on when it's not being allowed to be expressed through the real vein that it needs to be? It comes out sideways. Addictions, outbursts, unhealthy behaviors of all kinds, chronic depression or rage, or, you name it. But the energy is not going to just dissipate over time. There's an adage that time is the great healer. No, it's not. Nope. Time just sets you in whatever pattern you're establishing during the passing of that time. So if you're establishing healthy patterns of grieving and allowing for an active, ongoing grieving process, then over time, you will find healing. But if you're not, and you're blunting it, over time, you will find greater pathology and pain and problems and more deadness.
Wow. That just emphasizes to me, Chris, this importance of more is caught than taught. So our kids are going to watch us, how we handle this tragedy. And if we are bottling it up, if we are avoiding it, there's going to be those consequences that you just talked about. They're going to see some of the unhealthy sideways actions, as you said, of not properly dealing with this tragedy. So it's okay. It's right. There's an invitation to process this and process it with them, like we talked about. That leads us to this benefit number 3 of the benefit of empathy and the benefit of love in action, because they've first, we've invited them to open the dialogue and the communication as a family. And then secondly, this benefit of being caught, not taught. Now we're able to move into this idea of empathizing with those that are mourning. Maybe this tragedy is not in our own family. Maybe it is a friend or on a national level like we're experiencing. How can you empathize with those, with others? What could you do in terms of love and action, even as a child, when you're talking about this tragedy? What do you guys think? How's that worked in your own households?
Yeah, I remember taking a class in college. It was about grieving, actually. It was about how to help people grieve. And I remember this clear as day because the teacher said, the worst thing you can possibly say when somebody's going through a tragedy is, I know how you feel. Because you don't know how they feel. Just because somebody might have died in your past, maybe your dog died, maybe you went through something difficult, you can't apply it to their situation. It's too unique, too specific. So if you're doing that, I mean, I've always avoided that statement as soon as I've been around somebody who's been through a tragedy. So it's not, I know how you feel. It's actually, I don't know how you feel. I can't imagine how this feels. And a lot of what you already said, McCluskey, is sometimes it's just being there, just standing next to them. You don't have to have some fluffy thing that's going to make them feel better, because words might not make them feel better at all, no matter what you say. In fact, well-intentioned words could be hurtful. So just be there and say, and tell them, I'm here. That could be it.
Yeah, that feels really awkward for people, especially for men. We are fixers. We want to do something. Hey, let me know if I can help in any way. I will be there. And we mean it. And what we're really saying is, I'm really uncomfortable with the emotional piece of this, but give me something practical and I'll be Johnny on the spot with that. And in fact, those things are helpful, of course, but the very best thing we could do is what you just said there, McGreevy, just be with them. Don't weep with them and then like head for the door. Just being, well, what does that mean? Like sit and stare at each other? Well, no. And put on sackcloth and ashes? No. But being with them, meaning you sit and, if it's appropriate, you're holding a hand, or you're touching a shoulder, or you're just sitting beside them. And then you're getting up and making a cup of hot coffee or tea or something. You're rattling around in the kitchen and making something. It doesn't matter whether it's going to be eaten or not. We're not looking to make a memory here. You're just with them in their space, and you're checking back with them on a regular basis. That's the being with somebody, so they know that they're not alone. Like last night, 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, this a mutual friend of ours who lost her daughter, last thing I did right before I went to bed was I just sent her an email, and it simply said, I didn't want to send her a text, because if she was sleeping, I wanted her to keep sleeping. But if she wasn't sleeping, or if she got up in the middle of the night again, because you can't sleep during this, I want her to pop open her email, and there's a note that simply said, you're not alone. Mm-hmm. I'm with you, and there are others with you. We are still grieving and praying with you around the clock. You are not alone. So we can even do that at distance. We don't have to physically be there.
That's good, Chris. That's just a great practical way of being. Like you said, when distance precludes it, there are ways that we can just identify how we can come alongside them in life. And I know I'm reflecting back even to the passing of her grandfather and the kids. One of the actions that they chose to do is, as we prepared to fly out there to be with her grandmother, who had just lost her husband of 60 plus years of marriage, was they just wrote little cards, little handwritten cards. I mean, and as you know, I mean, as a father, as a grandfather, as a great grandmother in this case, to get a little crayon or stenciled, handwritten note can mean the world. It just simply says, I love you. I'm with you. Right.
Yeah. I remember when I went through a very challenging tragedy when I was in my 20s, a friend I was working with was killed on a construction site, passed away in my arms. And I remember sitting in the wake. I didn't let the bottle off my top yet. I was hurting really bad from going through all that tragedy. A lot of people said nice things like, I know how you feel. I lost somebody too, or I've been in this situation and I know how you feel. I'm like, yeah, great. I know you're trying to be nice. And the one that got me was a friend of mine. His mother came up to me and she didn't even say anything. She just had this look on her face that said, I'm so sorry. She just looked at me and gave me a hug, and it just broke for me. And I came undone. And that impacted me for so many years because she didn't say anything. She was just there and she was with me in my pain. And it just gave me the permission to be honest about how I felt in that moment. It was so powerful.
Michael, that's the example of, in fact, she did say something, the only thing to say. Her tears, her facial expression, her countenance said to you what you are feeling is normal and you're not alone in it. That's why it broke you. She did, in fact, communicate, but not with words. And that really underscores, I think, one of the main messages that we're saying here. It's not that there are no words at all, but usually we men will say way too many words or not even the few words that need to be said. But the being with and the weeping with those who weep, the use of ourself so that somebody's aware you're not alone and what you're going through, I'm with you in it. That communicates volumes. That's empathy, right?
Yeah. If you need to, go back and listen to our episode on vulnerability. There is no strength in putting on a stern face, biting your lip, and not expressing any emotion. That is weak. Hear me, men, it's weak.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, Michael. And you've shared, at times how just that transparency and vulnerability has been the source of your strength, the source of your growth and your confidence by just laying ourselves bare at times. And in that instance, sharing that powerful story of just the bottle exploded because someone was with you. Someone chose to just be there. And McCluskey, like you said, just communicating that in the understanding gaze into your eyes. And you're right. As men, that's something we need to learn more of. Sometimes just being there for those that are hurting. And in this example, as we're talking about our kids, letting them know that it's okay. Sometimes it's just there to hold a hand, there to wrap an arm around. It's going to say a lot more than even words can say. And that leads us to this last benefit I want to talk about in terms of how we discuss and tackle tragedy as a family. This benefit that by doing so, we value life and others in an even healthier way. When we're faced with these massive tragedies and challenges, personally, nationally, internationally, we're able to reflect, right? We're able to look at our own life, the lives of those around us, and hopefully we're going to value that a bit more.
There is a level of feeling fully alive through grief. I guess I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it does bring us back to that place where we know we're human, that we know that we're not going to be, at least in this world, there's an expiration date. We're all passing through here. And I do really think that addressing that and dealing with that pain gives us clarity on the fact that life is short.
It is so short. Somebody who was alive and well and breathing and was loved by many and loved many was here today and is now not here. Like that alone is like, what? Wow. That could be me. That could be you. That could be someone very close to you. For me, it just brings to the forefront, I'm alive today and I have the opportunity to suck the marrow out of life, to take every opportunity to get the most out of my day today, to love like I'm not even capable of loving, to put myself in situations that require courage, to go for it in life, because that could be me tomorrow. I could be gone tomorrow.
There's this movie that we love called The Three Amigos, and there's this really powerful scene where they go to Mexico to save this village, and they think it's all a joke. And they actually find out that what they thought was they were playing with fake bullets, that the one guy actually gets shot in the shoulder, and he's like, they're using real bullets. When we feel that deep pain, we can walk away. And we know that this life that we're living, that we're actually playing with real bullets, that every action that we make, everything that we do, every interaction with the people that we love have such an impact. And I forget that when life is just steaming along at 60 miles an hour and everything is great, I forget that we're playing with real bullets.
That's good, Jamie and Mike, what you're saying there about just the valuing of every day and the awareness that while we draw breath, we can soak up all that is really real. Last night as Rachel and I lay down to go to sleep and we're just still processing out loud, I said, if the husband of this young woman who passed away, if he had one more day with her, what do you think he'd do? What do you think he'd say? And so we talked about that. And of course, he doesn't. But the question can then be turned right back to us to say, well, I do have at least this day still with you. What do you want to do? What do we need to say? And it does call us as a family, when we process grief healthily and recognize that, tragedy, suffering, loss, all these things are part of living. Death is a part of living here in this fallen world. Then it does invite us to remember that every day is a gift. And these relationships are to be soaked up and lived out as fully as we can.
That is powerful, Chris. Just having those kind of very frank questions to our loved ones. And we can all agree life is precious. And so as we've talked about this idea of addressing and facing tragedy and the benefits that come out of that, understanding that more is caught than taught in your home. And so living out how do you address those tragedies and how you live that out as the man, as the spousal unit there for your kids, valuing life and those that are around you to a much greater degree, cherishing every single moment you get with them. So what about you? What did you hear today in regards to how you handle tragedy? The responsibility that you have as the man of your household to handle tragedy well, healthily. Where do you feel there's a growth opportunity for you to be even more proactive? How will you handle this topic of tragedy better? So what about you?